versus backsite? Were you able to get stuff rotated? Any?
Our group still needs help like rotating some points because we actually, or we set the automatic like point recorder.
Right. So did you bring the aerial panel in, and did that help you rotate it?
Kind of. We're still in the process of doing that.
Okay. So you need help from me to do that, or you guys are okay and you'll contact me if you need help?
Why not tomorrow? I think we can do that.
Okay.
We'll do it tomorrow.
If you run into an issue,
All of our turning points are in the correct spot. Like they're,
Right.
Just have to rotate it about the turning points in line.
Yeah.
right, you just have to pick that cluster of points and do a rotation. So you should have enough information there that you can do it. If you run into a problem, call, text, email, whatever. Happy to help.
Right.
Okay. Did anybody's group bring the points in and it lines up over the panel and there's no issues with rotations or anything? Okay. But you were able to adjust.
We reshot them.
Okay, so you guys are good?
We're gonna try to help the pictures. What? I haven't done anything. So
All right. So everybody's okay. You all should feel like you have enough drafting skills to create kind of a picture, right? Don't worry about these type of features like the boundary lines and the building description line. Just concentrate on like, okay, your sidewalks, your buildings, there's a little shed back here, stuff like that. Okay. So today I'm going to start talking about surfaces. Okay. Surfaces are something specific to Civil 3D. So a lot of the stuff we talked about on Wednesday is AutoCAD only. So you have AutoCAD and you have Civil 3D. Okay. Mechanical engineers use AutoCAD, but they typically use other versions of Revit, and there's different modeling softwares for different applications. Mechanical engineers aren't going to need to make a surface model with contours, right? So the program has evolved over the years to be very industry specific. Okay, so we're going to focus on surfaces today. So if you click on this little tool space icon, when you open your drawing, right, this will pop up. So the two tabs that you're going to use most frequently are prospector and settings. Okay. Settings is where we edited those drawing settings way back in the first time we looked at CAD. Now we're going to focus on prospector. Okay. So if you're in settings, just tab over to prospector. Okay. You have points, groups, and surfaces. Right now, there is no surface in this drawing. A surface is how you create contours. Okay. A surface is how you create contours. So that's mainly what we're going to do today. So you also have points and point groups. So let's go in here and create surface. Well, actually, if you started a drawing from scratch, okay, if you tried to bring in the points and it gave you an error, it's because that particular point group style wasn't in. A lot of things in Civil 3D require their own styles. Okay. That base drawing that I gave you, if you insert that as a block, a lot of the styles are in there. I don't need to revisit that. Everybody kind of okay with that, inserting it as a block? Okay. So if I go in here, right click, and go to create surface, what type of surface are we going to create? Well, we're going to create a tin. Okay. A tin stands for triangular interpolated network. So you remember when we looked at this before, on the PowerPoints, it's just a triangular grid between any 3 points, right? And it draws this mesh network over everything shot. Grids and volumes are for doing earthwork. Okay, you go out and there's a big topsoil stockpile and the contractor wants to know how many triaxle trucks is that. You send a survey crew out, you shoot it, and you can get a volume. Okay, so most of the time you're doing a tip. Okay. It tells you that it puts it on the layer C topo. You need to give it a name. I'm just going to call it EG for existing grid. You can call it whatever you want. Name doesn't really matter. Description, you can put in a description of it, you know, the date, whatever you want. Style. If you started drawing from scratch, if you go down here to style, you see everything that you click, you get these 3 little radio dots on the side. That, if you select that, it brings a pull down. So anytime you see a little down arrow or those 3 little dots, that's an indication that there's something there that you can select, that you can change. So right now, you see how the style is set to no display? If your surface is set to no display and you're adding this stuff in it, you're like, well, it's not drawing it. It's because it's set to no display. Okay. If you want it to show the contours as you're working, click on those 3 little buttons and you get a surface style. Okay. If you click the little down button, these are all the different styles there. If you started from scratch and you didn't insert that template drawing, this would be blank. There might be like a standard one down there. When you get out and start working for civil engineering company XYZ, they're probably going to have their own catalog of styles already set up. If you want to mess around with these styles, you can go in and change just about any parameter. I've already got a cluster of them in here for you to choose from. I'm going to use, so you have design and existing. Okay. Most of the time you're doing existing 1 and 5. That's what I would recommend. You can choose what you'd want. So I'm going to select existing 1 and 5 and hit OK. Now, see how I have this little plus button? That little plus indicates that there's something else there. Right, so if you click on the little plus on the side, you can see all of the different surfaces that would be in this drawing. Right. I just created this. Do we see anything? No, because I haven't added anything to it yet. So if we click on it, these are all of the different things. So you've got masking, watersheds, and definition. Watersheds, that's a discussion for another day. You can actually have a regional map of the entire Bushkill Creek watershed. If you have the contours, you can tell it to generate the watershed and it'll draw the watershed. And all the sub areas. So pretty slick. To define it, this is where you're going to go put stuff in so that you get the contours back out. Okay. You've got boundaries, break lines, contours, point files, point groups. You've got all this information that you can add to create a surface. The stuff that you're going to add, you're going to add boundaries, break lines, and either point files or point groups. Those are the ones that you're going to focus on. Can you generate it with all that other stuff? Absolutely. DEM is a digital elevation model. Anybody have any classes in GIS yet? ArcGIS? Or had a class where they talked about ArcGIS? DEM files are a GIS-based application. You're going to focus on boundaries, break lines, and point groups and point lines. So those are all the things you can add. Well, you need to create a point group. So you can go up here, points, create point group. Point group, whatever. I'm just going to call mine EG points. Again, you can define it however you want to define it. All right. What do you want to include or exclude in your point group? Well, that depends on what you shot. Depends on what you're going to create contours. So in the field, sometimes we'll shoot the corner of a building. We can't see the ground elevation at it. So we'll raise the rod up way high, but I know the elevation of that point is wonky. So I wouldn't want to use that in my surface model because that's not an accurate representation of the ground. Right? So let's say I shot a bench and I took a shot on the top of the bench where you sit, like this table. Should I include that in my surface model? No, because that's not really an accurate representation of what's going on the ground. So you can exclude that from your surface points. They're still in there for you to draw your drawing, but you don't need it to create the contours. Same thing with your hub, right? Your hub might stick out of the ground 3-4 inches. Should you include that hub in the surface model? Not if it sticks up out of the ground 3-4 inches, because it's going to pull the contours up at that spot. Anybody ever see inlets along the road, catch basins that take the road water? A lot of times, rather than sit there with the field book and write all of the inverts, does everybody know what an invert is? It's the bottom elevation of the pipe inside the structure. Okay. We need to know the elevations of the pipes coming in and out of manholes, drainage features, whatever, right? Rather than measure it and write it in a field book, we'll take the rod, drop it down till it gets to that invert and somebody takes the shot on it. So I get the invert of it, but do I want to make a surface model? No, it's going to like make a big hole in the ground. So I want to exclude those points. Everyone following? Most of your surveys, you're going to probably include most of your points. Right? So include. You can do with numbers matching. So you can have a list of, these are all the points that I want to do. You can do a selection set in the drawing and go grab all of the ones you want to include. Right? If you know you want to include most of them, except 1 or 2, you can say, I want to do from 1 to 1,000,000, right? Because that's going to capture all the points in the drawing, right? It doesn't have to match every point that's in, right? Like if you tell it to search to 1,000,000, it's only going to find 500, and that's going to be close enough, right? Then you can go back and say, I'm going to exclude, say, point number 10, or whatever, that I know the point is bad. Or you can go grab the point that you want to exclude. Everybody follow that? Okay. So we're going to create a point group. Once you have everything in there that you want, you hit apply. If you don't hit apply, it's not going to remember. It's kind of like doing a save in that particular program. So don't hit cancel. Make sure you hit apply and then okay. So apply and okay. Why the program is written that way, I do not know. So apply, okay. Now we've got a point group. So now I'm going to say, for the surface that I just made, I'm going to add a point group to it. Notice how one of the default point groups is all points. That's an option. Right? So EG points is my point group because let's just assume I had some points that I didn't want to show. Now, let this cook for a minute because it's going to think, okay? Now it added the points in. Okay. So now, wow. See how long it took it to generate that? But it created contour lines just from the points. Okay, let's take a look at this. The white lines represent every 5 foot interval. And then these are 1 foot in between. Right, so let's say this is 100, 101, 102, 103, 104, 105. Everyone see that? Can anybody see anything funky that, wait, that doesn't look like it makes sense, Paul. There's like either a big hole or a big mound in the middle of the building, precisely. That's one thing. What else you
It's
got?
like a dip, like a, it's up, down, like
This?
Sort of,
Over here?
yeah, like it was like straight lines. Like it was
Yeah.
straight and it works.
Yeah, so we'll talk about that too. Anybody see anything else going on? Let's go up here and look at the road. I know there's a curb, right? So if I know there's a curb there, the contour should follow that curb for at least a little bit, right? It's not doing it. That's the importance of feature lines. You remember when we looked at the 3 different maps that we looked at before, where you add feature lines? That's the purpose of it. It's like a break in the contour. So how do you get those? Those are exactly what I just said, feature lines. All right. In the surface, just push the I believe button because they're both the same thing. In the surface, right, it says break lines. In Civil 3D, in another spot, break lines here is the same thing as feature lines. Break lines equal break lines equal feature lines. So break lines in the surface, if I go to home, right, see feature line? Feature line and break line are the same thing. Why the heck couldn't they just call it the same thing? But just, they're the same thing. So now you need to create these feature lines along any break, curb, sidewalk, building. Right? So the program automatically puts them on their own separate layer. All right, the layer that the program uses is see Topo feet. So I'm right clicking. I'm going to select all. I'm going to turn everything off so that we only look at my feature lines. So I drew my drawing, like I drew my driveway, my sidewalk, my curbs. I drew all of that stuff in beforehand. Then I came back and I drew these feature lines. These feature lines are 3-dimensional lines. Right? They have a horizontal and a vertical position. Okay. So everybody sees the house, the driveway, the shed. So how do I draw these? Good question. I'm going to turn everything back on. Okay. If I'm in another menu ribbon at the top, I want to be on home. Okay. If you click on home, right here, second grouping over, you have feature lines. Okay. You can create feature lines from an object alignment corridor, stepped offset. Oh my God. Right? Everything in CAD has so many things that it's overwhelming. Don't get overwhelmed. Okay? The one that you're going to do is you're going to create feature lines. You're just going to draw. Okay. So feature line, create feature line. Okay. You don't need to specify a site. Just recognize that if you do, make sure you stay consistent all the way through. Don't draw half of them and then somebody draws another half of them and somebody put theirs in a site. You go to make the surface and only some of the feature lines are shown. That's because some people put it on a site and some people don't. Most of the time for a small project like this, I don't have a separate site. If we created our own company when we all graduated and we did this project after you graduated, I would say make sites with your own building name, do your stuff in there so that we have separate sites. It's just a way to control and manage the data. Follow? You just want to make sure that you're consistent with whatever you do here. Okay, style, just use basic feature frame. Okay, because you see all those, right? We can go in and we can probably do 300-400 level classes on how to create roadway corridors. Don't worry, about it. Just do basic feature. That's all you need to do. Basic feature. It's going to draw them on this layer C topo feet. That's what you want it to do. Right? You don't have existing objects. If you do, you can tell it to erase that existing object. But don't worry about that. Just use C topo feet, basic feature line, and hit OK. Everyone good? All right. Now, you got to look at the command line down here at the bottom, or if it's floating in the screen. See how it's saying draw feature line? What's your starting point? Okay, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to do a feature line from this point here. So to select the point, points are nodes. A node for OSNAPs is this little dot. Okay. So each point that you select, you want to snap to node. So node. And then if you hover over the point with your cursor, you see how you get this little green highlight? That tells you it's going to grab that point, which is what we want it to do. So you're snapping to that node. Now watch what happens on the command line. See this elevation, 9921? Specify elevation, 99205. It grabs it for you. You don't have to write it down, but you do need to check and make sure that if this point is 9921, that this says, yeah, 9921. Just make sure it makes sense. Follow that? And then you hit enter. Now it's saying, okay, give me the next point, or are we drawing an arc? More on an arc in a second. We're just going to do dot, dot, dot right. Okay. We started out at 9921. Somebody get a calculator out. Put 9921 in your calculator. All right. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my next point. So I'm going to select node. Or I showed you last time how to turn the running O snaps on. For the demo, I'm just going to go point to point. So I hover until I get my little green circle. And it's telling me 2.25. Well, what the heck is 2.25? Well, you see how you have SL for slope, E for elevation, D for difference, SU for surface, T for transition. Those are all the different ways that the program can assign an elevation. You with me? I'm going to hit E for elevation to check. Does this match 9928? 9928. Yes, it matches. It makes sense. Right? I'm going to go back to what it was listed at, which is slope, which again, you see the little blue SUT SL. I'm going to switch it back to slope. Oh, what was that grade? Yes, yes, you're right. It was that grade. Slope is what?
Rise over run.
Rise over run. And grade is just a percentage of that by 100, right? So the distance between those 2 points, right? All right, I'm gonna hit. So once you have your entire feature line drawn, right, you would hit enter twice, and then it drops back out. What I want to do here is take your 9921 and subtract 9828. So 9921 minus 9828. Everybody got that? Now divide by 41.172. And you should get 0.0225. Yeah. Yeah, 0.0225. Everybody follow how it's doing this math? It's just doing the slope calculations for you. Okay. The take-home message with that demo is just make sure when you're drawing your feature lines that the numbers it's giving you make sense. 9828, then I'm going to here. So you can set it to either elevation or grade. 98.23, yep, that's what I want. 9832. All right. So then when you get to the end, you just hit enter twice, and it will draw that feature line for you. Everybody follow what I did there. Did I go too quick? Okay, Chris.
Can we draw that over the ones we already have for a sidewalk?
Yes, because the sidewalk, right, should just be a two-dimensional line. It should not have elevation associated with it. Otherwise, if you wanted to hatch that sidewalk, the program's going to be like, what are you talking about? These lines are like, it needs a closed figure to create a hatch. So yes, you are going to draw right over the top of it. The other thing drawing it first is going to help you with is the curves, and I'm going to show you that right now. Okay. This is straight line, point to point to point, right? You can create curved feature lines, right? Because contours kind of can sweep around a curve, agreed? Okay, so you see how I have a green feature line here, but I don't have one here on the outside? Let's add a curved feature line out here, all right? The only thing you have to do, in addition to what we just did, right, is go to feature line, create feature line. Again, site is none, basic feature line, hit OK. Where are we starting from? I'm starting from this node. I have my running O-snaps on. You can go up here and select node. It's telling me my elevation is 105.73. Good to go. Okay, hit enter. Now, I could go along and just go point to point to point. Right? Or see how it says arc? Tell it you're drawing an arc. So you type A for arc. Now it's going to draw you a three-dimensional feature line. To draw a curve, how many points do you need? At least 3, right? You can have more. Everybody sees how this is a nice sweeping several 100-foot curve. I took a shot about every 50 feet. So now what I'm going to do is between my shots, I'm going to say somewhere in between here is a point on the curve, and then the end of the curve is my next shot. So I told it, you're on a curve. It's asking you for a second point or a direction. You're going to tell it second point, right? It's looking for a second point. So what you can do is just pick any spot along this curve, which is this right here, nearest, right? So it's going to grab the nearest feature. So it's the line that has 2 dots that are kind of close together. So select that, pick a point on your arc. And then it asks you down on the command line, look down on the command line, specify the end. The end is going to be the other point that you shot. The elevation is 106.77. And you see how it's curved instead of going straight line. So you hit enter. And now it's asking, do you want to keep going with the curve? Yeah, yes, please. So you see how this curve is tangent? I can specify a second point if the curve was kinked, but it's not. See how it's just a sweeping curve, right? So second point, nearest node. The next spot is 110.60, 110.60. Everybody follow what I'm doing? And I'm going to do one more segment. Second point, nearest node, one. See, this is why you got to pay attention. For some reason, it grabbed 107. Is it 107 or is it 114.69? I don't know what happened. Maybe one of these other lines has an elevation attached to it. But that's why you got to pay attention. I can just type the number in, right, and get the elevation that I'm looking for. Or I could undo that and go back and try and regrab the node again. Follow? So now I have a curved feature line. This is great, but what I want to do is I want to make sure that when it draws this feature line, that it doesn't cut a straight line across it. Okay. So you can go to insert PI. And I had the line selected. You're going to tell it an increment. So I want to point every 5 feet along the curve. The purpose of doing that step is so that it kind of smooths the contours out, so that they don't look like they have hiccups in them or that they're jagged. Okay, everyone with me? So we have our point group and we have feature lines. Let's add our feature lines to our surface and see what happens. Okay, so what you can do, so you just get your feature lines, is turn everything off. So that's that first little light bulb column. And then go to your C Topo feet layer, the layer that you're going to draw your feature lines on. So that's the only thing that's on. Okay. Now I'm going to go back to my tool space and I'm going to go back to Prospector and I'm going to navigate to my surface. So go to tool space. I'm going to navigate to my surface. Now I'm going to add break lines. So you come in here, you right click on break lines and hit add. You can call it whatever you want. I usually call it FLT for fault line or feature line. And I number it. The reason I number it is because I might draw this and see something doesn't look quite right. I might need to add more. So then the next grouping that I would add would be FLT2, 3, 4, whatever. Okay. So that's the way I normally name it. Your middle ordinate distance is 1 foot. That helps with smoothing things along the curve. You can adjust that or you can just leave it at the default. Okay. For now, I'm going to leave it at the default. So now it asks you to select objects. You don't need to select them one at a time. You can just create a window and select all. So I've got 192 feature lines in my, and I'm going to hit enter. Now again, this is going to take a second to think about everything that I just told it to do. You just told it to take a whole bunch of 3D feature lines and create contours. So now let's take a look at what happens. Everybody see the difference in the contours? See how we have a curve now? Everybody follow adding those feature lines, what it did to the surface model? You see how in the drawing, it's going out to the furthest point all the way around? Do we think the contours get pulled like this out to the periphery, way out? No, we want to sort of define what the limit of our accurate box is. So that's your boundary. The other thing is, people accurately noted that you've got contours going through the building. That's probably not really accurate either. So let's go in here and add boundaries to this. So what you're going to need to do is, just like feature lines, you're going to need to create them. Okay. I already made a layer, see topo boundary. So that's going to be the extent of my surface. Okay. I want to crop my contour lines back to that point so that it's more accurate. So again, go to your surface, go to definition. So the surface that you're working on, definition, boundary, right click, add. You can call it whatever you want. I'm calling it OB for outer boundary. So the first one that you're going to draw is the outer limit of your surface. And you're going to make it a non-destructive break line. Okay, so you're not going to destroy anything. It's just, you're going to trim back the surface. So you hit OK, you select that. Okay, you're not really seeing what's going on until I turn the contours back on. But now I want to add another one. I want to cut out where the contours are going through the building. So I'm just going to call it H1 because that type of feature line is called a hide. So you go to tight and you go down to hide. So the two that you're going to use are outer and hide. So if you don't want contours going through an object, just tell it to hide at those locations. I'm going to go back in. I'm going to turn everything back on. So select all, turn everything back on. And look at that. Turns out where my house is. How do we know what elevations those lines are? We don't really, right? We need to label it somehow. Any type of labeling in Civil 3D is called an annotation. Okay. So what I want to do now is I want to label my contours. So we go to annotate, which is one of the menus on this ribbon. Right? Annotate and add labels. So if you select, you see how the button is split in half, an upper and lower. If you select the upper one, these are all of the different ways you can label something. Well, what are we labeling? We're labeling a surface. Are we labeling a slope? No, we're labeling a contour. You can either label one contour line at a time, or you can label a whole string. All right. I'm going to hit multiple. And those are your different styles. So I have it set to this e.g. 1 foot interval. So the major interval is every 5 feet. So I'm going to change that one to every 5 feet for this major. And then for the minor, I'm going to use the 1 foot interval. and I'm going to select add. Now it asks me, where do I want to go? So I want to label a string of contour lines from here to here. Cool. Just label all my contours. Now, a surface, everybody look, you see how these look like individual lines? They're not. If I select this, see how it grabs all of the contour lines, the boundary, everything. It's like me handing you this phone. I'm not handing you an individual app, I'm handing you the phone. It's one object. Right? Now, when you draw yours, you see that little, if I select the contour label, you see that little blue line that pops up? I'm going to right click and go to properties, and I want to show you something. If that little blue line is there, let me find it. Oh, okay. Contour, display contour label. I'm going to hit true. Okay. If you draw that line across there, and you see how you're getting the line that you drew, if you don't want to see that, you only want to see your labels. If you select the line, right click and go to properties, switch this display contour label line to false. And when you go back to the drawing, you're like, well, wait, it's still showing, it's blue. Until you regen or pop out of the command, it's not going to make it go away. Everyone follow that? So don't assume it didn't do it. Do something else, regenerate the drawing, zoom in, zoom out. Wake it up, it's napping. And it'll recognize it. Follow? How does everybody feel about generating contour lines, feature lines? I have the video recorded. Again, one quick thing, Matt, I'll get your question. If you go to videos, if you click on videos, there's a whole thing on creating surfaces here. It's not homework, you don't have to watch it. But if you're like, I have no idea what he was talking about. Matt had a question, then I'll get you.
So what are we drawing the feature lines for? Everything?
Anything that has a vertical reveal. So if you had shot like 10 points out on the quad just to get contour lines out there, you don't need a feature line out there. I would recommend it along sidewalks, steps, curbs, like out here along Sullivan, you know, in front of the history house and stuff, there's a curb. You're gonna want them along there. If there's like a landscape island, you're gonna want it around there. If there's like a berm, like the top of the hill, you know, you want to string along the top and the bottom.
And should those points kind of be the same elevation, like close to the same elevation?
It depends, right? The berm can be sloped.
Okay.
I mean, yes, it should follow the general topography, but yes. Are they going to be exactly the same elevation? Unless it's a constructed building where it's a first floor, there's probably a little slope. Even the quad is probably sloped at like 1% or 0.5%. Nico, you had a question.
Oh, yeah.
That was a question. For curves, right? You need two, right? You need the bottom of the curb and the top back of the curb. So here's your road surface, right? And I'm exaggerating. And this is your sidewalk. This is your concrete sidewalk. Okay. So if this is half the road, and this is the center of the road, right? The feature lines that I would draw along the longitudinal length of it would be the center line, bottom of curb, street side, top of curb, away from. The reason I do this is because usually this distance is only about 2 inches, 1 inch. And if you have two 3-dimensional feature lines in CAD and they cross, it's like Ghostbusters, you never cross the streams, it's bad, Egon, right? It gets confused. If you take a vertical surface this way and a vertical surface this way, we know that that's probably a bridge or a tunnel or something. CAD's like, what are you talking about? So you want some separation between the two so they don't cross. And then your sidewalks. And then like if you have a berm, so you'll shoot your swale and your top of berm. Well, now, if it's a much more definitely man-made, right? If it's something that's more natural, you know, you can get approximate and generate it that way. Make sure you are saving your work regularly, please. I don't want you to spend 2 hours on something. Even the small stuff that we're doing,